My client was here visiting his daughter. He was from Brazil. He came up with his wife and his young daughter, who was 6 years old, for a visit. And he was a person who loved his family. He had multiple children. He loved to run. He ran a lot of marathons. He loved the outdoors. He also loved computers and he loved teaching, and he was just a really good person. So my client was here in 2019 visiting his daughter and was here for about a month, and he wanted to get back to work. He checked out a place that can help place immigrants in the community. It's called Casa Latina, and my client was from Brazil and he spoke Portuguese, so they were able to help him. They gave him some training to do basic work like working in the community, like gardening or moving. So after he checked out Casa Latina, then they called him and they told him that they had some work for him. And it happened to be at a construction site for the day, so day labor. He did that. He got there at 6:30 in the morning and it was raining. It was terrible weather. Somebody gave him some rain boots to wear that day because he didn't have any. And then he just proceeded to do what he was told, which was, move wood around and clean up. My client was brought onto the construction site to just do day labor and moving lumber around. No real skill involved, but he was happy to be there. But at the end of the day, he was asked to assist in some bigger work that was being done, and that was lifting a very large framed wall for apartment buildings. And this was a townhouse, so this wall spanned 4 separate apartments in width. It was very long, very tall, and very heavy. He was asked to help. He was doing what he was told. He came up to the 2nd floor of this apartment complex and was told to lift after they counted to 3, and that's all he was told. There was several men up there doing this work, and they all proceeded to lift this heavy framed wall, and unfortunately it wouldn't go any further. All the men just kind of got stuck. It was either because it was too heavy, but what we later learned in the case was that it was because there was a block behind the wall that was there, shouldn't have been there, and was preventing the wall from going all the way up. So what happened was all the men gave up lifting this wall because it was so heavy, and they all let go. My client didn't. He wasn't sure what was going on. The people just let go and ran, and the wall just came down on his lower legs and crushed them. Sadly, he sustained really bad leg injuries as a result. My client was injured on the job site, and they lifted up the wall, called 911, and he was immediately transferred to Harborview Hospital. They did x-rays right away, and they found that he had fractures to both lower legs. So his tibia and fibula of both legs completely broken in half. They did emergency surgery. He ended up with rods in both lower legs as a result. Ultimately, he had 4 surgeries to help resolve the injuries as well as the pain. He had a very long road to recovery. He was in a wheelchair when I first met him. He wasn't able to walk for 6 months, clearly not able to work or provide for his family for a period of time. During my client's recovery, it was really hard for him. He was an active runner, ran every day and many miles a day, so to not even be able to walk was really hard. To not be able to provide for his wife and his young child. He had older children as well, but he had the one child to provide for. He kind of got stuck here in the United States because he was so injured he couldn't go home. His immigration status was at issue. It was just a very stressful situation for him to be in and just be at the mercy of working with the Department of Labor and Industries and trying to get recovered and trying to get care. When he was in Brazil, he worked as a roofer and worked in construction, and he was very active, very fit. And as a result of his injuries, he had pain every day. So this was a devastating injury for him. It's also a permanent injury. He'll never be the same based on the rods in his legs and the severe injuries that he sustained. So my client's injury was preventable. So he was working as a day laborer, never should have been asked to lift a heavy wall like this. That was not part of his job for the day, nor was he given any instructions or training on how to do this. There was a framing company on the job site that was hired to do this, and they failed my client. Really, this injury was preventable, shouldn't have happened. Framing and lifting walls is one of the most dangerous jobs in a construction site because they do have to be raised, they do have to be put in place. There are safer ways to do it. And the first way to make it safe is accident prevention planning, talking about it, making sure that everybody knows what their role is and what's going to happen. Also, there's equipment that can be used, such as wall jacks, to help with lifting the wall. If it's going to come down, then the wall jack will prevent that from hitting somebody if it comes down. There's lots of things that can be done to ensure safety because construction is a dangerous job. So it's very frustrating for sure that my client got this injured on his first day of work, working as a day laborer. So after my client came to us, we had to figure out what happened and if anybody was responsible. And that meant trying to investigate the incident, but who was on site. So we found there was a general contractor. They were building the townhouses. Then who did they hire to do the framing? We found out who that was. And that wasn't very easy initially because we had to look through L&I's investigation of the accident site. We filed a lawsuit against those two entities, and after we did that, we found that there was yet another subcontractor on the job site that the framing company brought in. And this is really where the mishap happened, is that the framing company that was initially hired farmed it out to somebody else. And that company was trying to learn how to do the framing. They wanted to get into this business. The general contractor really didn't even know that they were on the site. And so now we have 3 potential at-fault parties. What we had to do legally is understand the employment situation for our client. And what was interesting is that the general contractor said that they weren't his employer. And the subcontractor said that they weren't his employer. And why that's important is because you can't sue your employer in Washington. But they were both saying the other was the employer. So we didn't know who the employer was. But we went forth with a lawsuit against all 3 entities to determine who was at fault. The defendants in this case were actually blaming my client. He didn't have rain boots that morning because it was raining and he was given some rain boots. When he was asked to go help lift the wall, he was still wearing those rain boots. Now that's not typical construction foot attire, but it was fine for him for what he was doing, which was walking around in the mud and carrying wood around. But once he was asked to help lift the wall, he was still wearing these boots. Then they said that he slipped. That they didn't drop the wall on him, that he just fell and just ended up there. And so he was responsible. None of that really held any water, but it was the circumstances that he was presented with. He didn't slip. That was his testimony, that he basically was being crushed by the wall and it fell on top of him. The financial recovery that we obtained for my client helped him immensely because he had been living just paycheck to paycheck from what he was receiving from the Department of Labor and Industries, which isn't enough money. And so he was able to have better income, be able to provide for his family, as well as help him figure out his status here in the United States. He was in limbo for a period of time because of his immigration status. He was here from Brazil, and this would allow him to go hire an attorney to help him get that situated, and so that he could move on with his life. This case meant a lot because I was really excited to tell my client about it, the recovery, and see the smile on his face. This was during the pandemic, so it was over Zoom. But it really was rewarding to be able to achieve that result and give somebody just this leg up that they really needed and compensation for everything they've been through and will go through for the rest of their life. So it felt really good. I also know that we put a lot in the legal strategy on the case due to some of the issues that we had. So I know that we worked hard to achieve the result that we got. what this case says about GLP attorneys is that we really put the work in when it's needed. So first of all, we have excellent attorneys here. We love doing construction cases. They're very interesting, but they're also very complicated. And so it does take a deep dive into all of the records in the investigation to determine what claims can be made, and we can do that. We have great attorneys and great paralegals who can really help dig through the paperwork that we get. In this case, there wasn't as much paperwork because they didn't do a very good job at maintaining a safe work site, so there wasn't a lot to look through. But we did investigate the complicated nature of the parties and who was on the job site. And it was just a townhouse. It wasn't a huge construction project. Really took a lot of investigation. So GLP collaborates. We're a collaborative law firm. We work together. We work really hard. And other law firms probably would have passed on this case because on its face, it looked like he was an employee of the general contractor. General contractor was mainly at fault. And you can't sue your employer in Washington. So on its face, it could be a decline by other law firms. We took the case and we spent the time to investigate it. And really during the whole pandemic, it had an extra challenge. So he came in right before the pandemic started. And then we worked on it throughout the whole time. The level of dedication that GLP attorneys puts into cases is why I love my job. I've been working here for 31 years and love the firm, but I also really just love what we do for people and how much work we put into helping people that really need it.